Hello again, everyone. I would like to officially welcome you to Visualizing People Networks, connecting people, processes, and ideas. Now, everything is connected. It's time to see the links. Now, if you don't have your family, your colleagues in your brain, you're missing out. So a lot of times, and even in terms of our webinars, I think that's why we're so excited and having so much fun today, because normally we'll cover adding files or data integration, how to visualize business processes, and we're still going to cover all that, but the focus on today is going to be about the people. And the cool thing about people is the brain is an ideal interface to visualize people relationships, because many times you have many different relationships to a person. Somebody might be your friend. They might also be a colleague. They might be working on 3 different projects with you and an expert in maybe technology. How do you represent that so that you're fully leveraging that person, and how do you share that with other people so they can see that as well? So we're going to get started and cover that. My name is Shelley Hayduck, and I'm co-hosting today's event with Tracy Barr, our Manager of Customer Solutions.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today.
And we also have Matt Caton, who will be moderating our Q&A panel. For those of you that just signed on, I want to reiterate, we have a very active questions panel. It's in your questions panel. Feel free to chat anything in throughout the session, and Matt will get to as many questions as he can, and we will also reserve a good 15 minutes for Q&A. So people networks, how do we get started? What do we do? So I just created a very small fledgling brain just to give you a sense of what does that mean. You know, I've dragged and dropped all my documents, I've imported a folder, my bookmarks. What can I put in my brain as far as people? Well, there's a lot. You can put family. Why would you put family in there? Vacation planning, kids. Maybe you're helping a niece or nephew or a daughter or son of yours prepare for college, organizing all that. Maybe you have a parent who's aging, or you have health issues that need to be mapped out. Family in your brain is incredible. Family is so much a part of our life. Having thoughts on people, particularly your family in your brain, it can pay dividends, and I'll cover a few examples on that. Friends as well. Friends are always very interesting. I have calendar reminders for their birthdays. I'll also, if I'm online shopping, I'll love to drag and drop links to stuff that, hey, I might buy come Christmas or birthday, so that's an excellent place for friends if they're reading books or make recommendations on books, new products, that can also be linked. And then, of course, your team. When you're actually working with people, you want to connect them to their relevant project. And we can take it a step further in a business setting with your team by creating not only thoughts for people, but what we call thought types. So is somebody an expert in an area? Are they a coworker? Are they the CEO? Are they an executive, director, or visionary? So I've actually just opened up an area. And if any of you guys want these thought types, I can actually zip up this brain and send it to you. And this brain, these thought types are in a number of our templates in the Brain 8. But let me just go to these thought types here so you can see these are just some ways of organizing people. So if I want to start talking about my team in my people network, let's say I'm working on a new web design project and I'm building a team. What I can do is go ahead and start adding people. So I might put Matt and Tracy in my brain. Now, as far as what I want people to do, I might tag Tracy as an expert, or maybe she's going to be the project leader of this new web design project. So let me put her over here as a jump thought, and Matt is an expert. So now you can see I'm starting to categorize people, and now I can start connecting them to their relevant sources of information. So on my web design project, I'm going to start working on homepage content. I just created a thought. I'm going to add a document. And I can start typing the homepage content. And I can go ahead and save that. And that gets saved right into my brain. But then from there, I can continue to build this out with people in mind. So if I have a particular person, maybe I have a friend whose name is Pam, and we do all kinds of things. We go diving, we do book clubs, so I can add all this stuff for Pam. But Pam is also a great writer, so I actually want to talk to her a little bit about my homepage content. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking Pam and I'm connecting her to a project that I'm working on as well. So now you can see how quickly I'm starting to contextualize people and how I can create thought types for people in a brain. I can also set up tags for people. So for instance, if I go into my tags area, a tag is just another additional metadata. So Matt is an HTML programmer. So I'm going to put that as one tag. The other tag is he is a graphic designer, man of many talents. So I'm going to add that to Matt as well. And Tracy is a fabulous writer, so I'm going to put her in there for writing. And she is actually a sales expert as well. Okay. So now I've got people tagged with their talents. So what this means is as I'm growing and building a team, I can start to aggregate. So if I am looking, and of course, let's imagine this brain is huge. Like let's go back to my team and maybe under coworkers, I've got Jack, Sam, and Bill. And let's tag Bill as an HTML programmer as well as Jack. So, I could just be somewhere else in my brain. We're going to start our new project. The new project is going to be, or a new phase of the product, which is coding website. So I'm going to start this phase of my project where I'm coding the website, but now I want to know, and let's imagine this brain is huge. I'm just starting from scratch because I want you to see how easy it is to build people in literally from nothing. But all of a sudden, I'm in need of HTML programmers on my team. So all I have to do now that I have that tag in my brain is click on HTML programmer, and that tag that is, and I can see that I can tap into Matt, I can use Bill, I can use Jack. So from there, I can say, well, okay, let me go ahead and get Jack involved in coding this new website. And now Jack is connected as well. So that's a little bit just to give you a taste of how easy and yet how powerful it is to not only get people in your brain so that you can understand how they relate to you, but also to leverage people's talent for potential new projects. And just to move to a larger example, I'm going to go ahead and open up my brain here. And this particular brain, of course, has a much more, a larger mapping of all, people, projects, and information. So what I want to do is I actually want to cover some basic architectures as for how to add people. A lot of people ask me, well, I have my project and I've got my information as child thoughts under the project. How do people fit in? So let's look at a couple different examples of the architecture of how to map out people in a business context. So I've just clicked on my thought called business. Now, clicking on any thought in the brain triggers all related pieces of information. So from there, I can move into clients, for instance, and maybe go into a particular client if I want to go to AT&T or so forth. And one of the things you'll see in this example here for this client is I have a person, Elizabeth Haid, who is the director. So she's connected to all of these projects as a jump. So now I've moved into Elizabeth's world, and I can also go to Jill Daniels or whatever, or Dan. And when I click on each person, what I can see is not just how they're connected to a project, but how they fit into the overall organizational structure. This is particularly relevant for human resources companies. These are also relevant for companies and teams that are growing by merger, by acquisition, or just you want to foster interdepartmental collaboration and cross-pollination of team members. So what you can do is sort of look at these people and see where they fit in. So now I can see, wow, Elizabeth is pretty busy right now with all her projects, whereas if I go to Jill, Jill only has 2, so maybe, just maybe Jill is someone that I might start thinking about for my web team, because Jill looks like she has a little bit more bandwidth than Elizabeth. And of course, they all report to Terry Mason, who is our VP of Sales, who reports to Barbara Power. So what I'm doing here now, we have parents, active thought, children, jump thoughts, and siblings, thoughts that share the same parent. So I'm using these fundamental relationships, these 4 fundamental relationships in the brain to represent how people are connecting. So in this particular model, generally anyone below another person represents a reporting hierarchy. Now, in some cases, you might have more of a flat organization, which is totally fine, where you might just have a web team, and kind of like in my other example where we just had Tracy, Matt, and some of the programmers just connected to projects. So it will really depend on your business needs, on your project needs, but this is particularly relevant just so you can see. And in a lot of cases, it can be subjective. So for instance, Terry, let me go ahead and connect Terry to sales. Terry's head of sales. So I've decided in this knowledge model of a brain, I'm going to have all my information on sales below and the person more as a jump, because they're different type of information. Now, that's not to say if I wanted Terry Mason to appear as a parent thought, sort of showing visually that he's overseeing sales, I can do that. Or if maybe it's just kind of another piece of information of sales, now we've got Terry as a child. But in this case, this particular knowledge model that we've created is what we call an interlocking hierarchy, where I sort of have a map of departments and the information below on one side, and then I have a mapping or a hierarchy of people down here where I can continue to sort of drill down, but then the departments that they're connected to, they are linked as jumps. So here again, we can see Gerard Hayes is involved in all of our conferences. Here's our conferences information, but he is the go-to. Now, let's just talk a little bit about changing relationships, because our relationships with people, like everything else, are very dynamic. So there's a lot of things we can do to change. So for instance, let's go ahead and I'm going to look at this from Barbara Power's view, where I can see that Terry has quite a bit of people reporting to him, and he's actually kind of busy. So what I want to do is I actually want to give Bill Walker a little bit more responsibility and have Molly as well as Dan report to Bill. And I also, because they're going to be working on some new projects, I want to make a new hire. So I'm just going to come in here and create a new thought for Hank Robbins, a new hire. And what I can do is I can actually go ahead and I can just put him in the brain, right, like immediately, or I can actually go into my thought types and add him in at the level that would be appropriate. He might be coming in as a director, or let me just go back in. Maybe he is just an analyst or an architect. So I can actually give him a thought type here just by looking at all these. Now, in this case, we're not going to hire him flat out. We want to see how he does. So we're just hiring him as a consultant. So I've got a consultant thought type there in my brain. And the thing that's great about these thought types is I can then sort of, as a call to action, aggregate people in a way that makes sense. So if I want to go and look in my thought types window here, and I'm just going to make my window bigger so everyone can see and make this a little smaller here, I can go ahead and go to this consultant thought type and see, well, how many of these consultants do we really have? Well, we not only have Hank, but I can see that I actually use this thought type for Tim Tang, who is also a consultant. And Tim has actually been with us for a while, so maybe in Tim's case, I'm going to change Tim, and he's been doing some good work, so we're actually going to come in and hire him at a director level. So now what I'm doing is I'm just going to change his thought type to director. Now, in terms of creating thought types for people, it's very easy. If for whatever reason I just wanted to create a new thought type, let's just call this independent expert, so somebody that works for the company, not really a consultant, but he or she is an independent expert, I can do that. And then what I can do is I can actually set up a color for that thought type. So if I want to go ahead and do that, I can set up a color. I can also name people. So if I want to change Bill Walker to independent expert, I can go ahead and make that connection. And now Bill is a independent expert. So that's the way thought types work. Likewise for tags, what I can do is I can also, the same thing that I showed you in that smaller brain, you can see how powerful it might be in a larger brain. Now I've got all kinds of tags in this brain, but one of the tags that is most interesting to me are just different talents that I've set up. So for instance, I've got people tagged as great salesperson. So if I'm looking for a new sales project, I can go ahead and basically grab that person. I can also see if we're doing a lot of work in different areas, who's remote. Now, these are, again, tags for people that help me sort of organize. So here, all these people are working remote, so from there I can go ahead and kind of look at each one of these people. And, you know, this is also great for hiring. So if I go to my human resources section in my brain, so let's go to my human resources plan, where I'm actually going to start hiring some people. So what I want to do is I want to drag and drop their resumes in the brain. So let me just come over to my desktop, and I'm going to go to my projects area and click on my hiring folder. And now what I can do is I can actually drag and drop Jim's resume into the brain. And I'm actually going to move this file in. So let's just go back to the thought area and select to move. So now this file is internal. And I've also got another person, Sue, that I want to go ahead and consider hiring as well. So now I've got Sue in my brain, and I'm just going to right-click again to either copy or move this file. So you can see now I'm actually dragging and dropping relevant resumes in the brain as well. So any type of source works quite well. So for instance, if I want to go out to LinkedIn, so I've just got my LinkedIn open. Let me just go ahead and open that up real quick. And let me just go ahead and somebody named Tim Cox, who's actually a PR expert, somebody else that we might consider bringing in. So in this case, I've met Tim from LinkedIn. So I'm going to drag and drop Tim's LinkedIn connection right here. And you can see how that works. Now, what I can do, now you'll notice that it does actually have the link to the profile. You do have to edit the name, so I'm just going to go in here and type Tim Cox in here. But the link is valid, so if I launch this, I will actually get to Tim's page. But the other thing that's kind of cool, in addition to adding Tim and getting that LinkedIn contact, is I can add images to people, which is usually more for personal setting, but that's pretty cool as well. Because, you know, looking at remembering someone by their face is very important. So I can actually copy the image, or I can actually go ahead and capture this thought icon by using our Snagit feature. I just selected capture thought icon, and now what I'm doing is I'm actually cropping that picture, and I'm putting that picture of Tim in my brain, and Tim is actually related to public relations. So I want to come in here and just make a connection to our public relations area. And I will have to, of course, consult with Jim. So what might make sense is for me to put Tim under Jim as well, and actually unlink him from public relationships. And I'm deliberately changing things so you can see how easy it is to change and further conceptualize. So now we can see we've got a couple of examples, but I've got Tim. So I've got 3 different candidates. We've only got so much budget. Do we hire Jim? Do we hire Sue? Or do we go with Tim and Tim's actually going to work as a consultant. So that's something else I can do. I can go back in there to that consultant thought type and do this. And so now when I mouse over Tim, I can see that he's got that color as well. And his type, if I look in my properties area, is consultant. So that's just sort of one really cool way we can look at, we can drag and drop. The other thing that we can do is take Facebook people as well and link them in. So all these different sources that we have for people make a lot of sense. So in addition to what we're doing for PR, I want to add Wojciech from Poland because we're actually might be doing some launch in Poland. So I want to take his Facebook page. Actually, he has a lot of expertise in mind mapping, and drag and drop that. And actually, I've already added him in, so here we go. And what you can see, again, that is a unique link to his page. I do have to update his name here, but that's okay because I can even add additional information. And let me just put his last name in there. And we've got him. Now we've got Wojciech in our brain. And the other thing that's kind of cool is if I want to grab anything, he's done some really nice visuals. I can actually go ahead and copy this, copy any image, and like I did with Tim, let me just go ahead and select to capture an icon and grab this cool image he did of mind maps and put that in my brain. So now, and I might want to link him to technology trends. Is sort of someone, because he's kind of a guy that, or in this case, make a thought type to technology trends, and because he's somebody who we could leverage in that capacity. So that's the way it all sort of fits together. The other thing that you'll want to do as you're adding people is you want to really go ahead and expand your views. So I can see that Jim has a lot of projects. Now he might be working with someone from Poland as well as Tim, and he's reporting to Angela. So I might want to get the bigger picture on Tim and how he fits in to public relations here. So I can actually go ahead and change my view to outline view. So I can go ahead and see more detailed connections. So now what I'm doing is I have a more linear view of different people and who reports to whom and what they're doing in their brain. And all I have to do is click on the plus or minus, and some of these people have people under them and some of them don't. So for instance, if I go to Bill's area, let me just open this up, he's actually an IT director, so he's reporting to all these different people as well, whereas Vicki only has 2 people. So this gives you another way of looking at content, and that's outline view. And if I want to click on Barbara as the CEO, I can continue to go through all these people connections and relations in my brain. And of course, I can continue to plus and minus different areas and see everyone. And there's Elizabeth Haid, how she fits into Terry. And Terry has a connection all the way back up to Barbara. So that's the way that works. So that's also a nice view, especially if you are visualizing human resources and org charts, and then a view that can be much more powerful for more network-oriented relationships that aren't necessarily hierarchical is expanded view. So I'm just going to click on New Expanded View, and you'll see how things have changed. In this view, what I can do is I can actually move around the different people and have it appear, rightly so, as a people network. And, I can collapse different areas. So if I don't need to see anything about PR, I'm going to click the minus sign, and I can plus or minus different areas. So for instance, Jim Johnson, who's an executive, if I plus on Jim, now this is where it gets interesting. I can see he's got a connection to Red Cross, which links to Jill. So Jill is sort of reporting to Terry from sales, but Jim, because he's the executive on Red Cross, so poor Jill, I hope she's not going nuts reporting to two people, and I can kind of look at this map and make some decisions there, and maybe it's like, well, she's not really doing sales anymore. Let me just have her work more closely with Jim over here. So I've made that change in my relationship map and of course, operationally. Now I can go up to View and save this expanded view as well. So I'm just going to call this my company people network. And hit OK. And that's saved. So if I want to go back to my top thought and go back to normal view, which is probably the best view for wandering around. Let me just go back to normal. You can see that I'm back in my normal view. However, if I do want to load any of these views, and you can see I have a lot of views, but the one I want is my company people network view. I can simply click on this. And there it is. It is very dynamic, and I just kind of move it where I want, and there is that saved view. So I can go from that back to my normal view, and, you know, I'm all set, ready to go. Another view that's quite nice for people is just normal view, but hitting the plus sign to have what we call our distant thoughts on. So you can see under my staff and teams here, you know, I can see how these people are all connecting. And again, the knowledge model or template that we're using here is we're actually taking the person and connecting them as a jump to their projects, and then that, because we want to see, we're saving the children and the parents in this case for the HR structure. So when I click on Time Warner, I can see that we've got all the information on that, but Fred advises. Now, the other thing with people is, and I think Tracy's going to cover a little bit more of this, but I just want to show you here that I can actually set up links and define how people and projects are related. So in this case, Fred is an advisor. He is advising Time Warner. So we've got that connection as well. So we can also get into link types. Now, a couple other examples. The other thing that TheBrain is great for is navigating new business development. We have a lot of nonprofits that use TheBrain for prospecting to secure funding and donations. We have tech startups that map out the whole venture capital landscape. So to that end, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to a hypothetical example based on a number of tech startups that we've worked at and show you how you can use TheBrain to visualize potential investors to start a new business. So this company is called One World Social Networking, and they are a social networking site that is built on philanthropy. They actually want to create a networking site for people to connect together to give money. So what they've done in this site is they've mapped out all their competitive social networking sites, as well as they've got product development and a whole marketing area here. But the area that is most interesting to our topic today is their venture capital area. I'm actually going to go to Jerry's brain in a minute. Jerry has a wonderful area on venture capitalists and funding. We've got a number of really, Conrad Clybourne, who was a big thinker. He has a great brain called MedTech IQ that actually links together private investment, educational projects, as well as government funding, all coming together in those connections. And that brain is just fabulous. We probably will have him speak again, but if any of you want to see that recording, you can go to our Big Thinkers area, or we're happy to send you the link. So this brain is sort of a hypothetical example based on a number of our brilliant brain users that do connect people, processes, and information, and they do amazing things with it. So let's just say I want to get venture capital. So let me go to the social networking sites, And of course, we've got all kinds of categories here on social networking sites. One of the categories we have is larger than life social networking sites, so sites that are just huge, and of course one of that would be Facebook. So when I click on Facebook in this brain, of course I've got news items, and I can link this because of course we can link to any web page, so it's going to pull up, you know, an eWeek article on data portability and so forth. But what we're talking about today is, you know, how people are related. So above in this brain and this knowledge model, and what I mean when I say knowledge model is the structure of the brain, and that's really why I want to show you a bunch of different examples. So you can see, you know, in some cases, my first example, I had connected people below as children. In my second example, we had the person to the project. That was more of a jump. Now, in this example, because it is investment focused, we have the investors appearing as parents. Feeding into it. So, for instance, if I click on the Founders Fund, which is a VC venture capital firm, I can see that they've not only invested in Facebook, but Genie, Engage, Slide.com, and I can click on Slide.com and see, you know, who else has invested in that company. And that's pretty interesting as well. So if we go back to Facebook, because if I think, for instance, I might be starting a company, a tech company in Hong Kong, in Asia, and I see that this particular investor it had actually funded Facebook, I might want to go ahead and then leverage that. And then, of course, we're talking about people we know, but the brain is great for researching people as well. So I might not know too much about this investor. I know a lot about the Founders Fund and kind of the venture capital world in California, but Asian Pacific investors, that's a little new to me. So what I'm going to do for this investor is I'm going up to options, and I'm going to use the brain's built-in search web feature just to do a search on this individual. And let me just go ahead and good old Wikipedia. Let's get some information on this investor. First thing I'm going to do, just because I might be setting up a meeting, is I'm going to copy and paste. So now I just paste that icon. So I've got an image of this particular investor. And I will be honest with you, I actually do this in my brain. When I'm working with business partners, people, I just find it so helpful, even in my personal section for doctors or whatever, to have that image of a person. It just helps me visualize, especially in this day and age of web meeting and phone calls, who I'm working with. So from there, you know, I can go ahead and learn a little bit. But what I'm most interested in is what he has done in internet and technology. So I'm actually going to go ahead and now add this piece of information under his name. So I can go ahead and I want to change this. I'm going to make some notes here. So I'm going to bring the notes section up, and I want to call this thought. I'm going to rename this thought here. Actually, let's just go ahead and say Internet and Tech Investments. Okay, and then actually let's go ahead and put his name in as well. Shing, there we go. And now I've got that in my brain. But I want to continue. I actually want to take some stuff that we have here, and I can see that he actually invested $20 million in 2 separate rounds. So this is particularly relevant. So I'm simply going to take this, copy, and paste this into my notes area. So I'm just building a little knowledge that I can put this here, or maybe this data is so relevant that I want to see it right when I click on his name and look at his face. So I'm going to go in here and paste, and I'm actually going to go ahead and highlight this with the brain's highlighter, and even make this a larger font. So, and let's go ahead and bold this stuff here. There we are. So you can see, and of course I can format this. Now when I'm looking at venture capital, and I've specifically targeted a particular investor, I can simply mouse over and see his image and have that note. And I might want to create another area in this brain called regional funding. That is depending on what project I'm working in. So in this case, I'm going to create an area for California and Asia Pacific. So let's just say Asia. So under Asia, I'm also going to go ahead now, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. So this is kind of another way of organizing. Under California, of course, if I want to go back and put in the founders fund, you know, I can go ahead and do that. Or, you know, individual investors here, like maybe Peter Thiel, I can do that as well. So you can see how I'm sort of building and making connections. So now I've got this particular investor located under venture capital. I've got some information. I can continue adding information. I can see that he has invested in Facebook. Now, in fact, I can actually click on this area and add a note. So if I wanted to add a note on kind of what he did, I can go ahead and even add an image or a note right here on this link. So that's also interesting if I want to see, or if I just want to annotate the link type. So if I want to edit this link and I want to add, you know, big investment or anything like that, I can simply go ahead and do that. And now I can go in and see that this is, just by looking at it, this is a big investment. I can actually adjust the color. Maybe I want to give this a green color, as well as maybe adjust the thickness of this link. Maybe we're going to give this a little bit more. I mean, I'm exaggerating for the purpose of demo, kind of doing this fast so you can see how this works. But this really is going to help me now see, okay, well, there's a number of partners, but this person, he's you know, a big investor, and he's from Asia. So this is a very interesting path for me, and I've learned a lot. And of course, I can continue to go ahead and build my knowledge on this individual. I've done a Google search. There's an article on Forbes. There's all kinds of things. So I'm going to come in here and drag and drop that article. And now you can see, so I'm sort of building my knowledge on this person. And let me go back to this foundation, which is important to add. So let's go ahead and get his foundation. It's a beautiful website. And let's go ahead and add that under his name as well. So you can see in just a couple minutes, I've really expanded my knowledge, but rather than just doing a search on this person, which I'm going to forget, especially if I'm not quite focused on this project, I've done a search, but then I've captured that search on this individual in my brain, and now I have this, and I can reference this, and I can share this with my partners or other techs that I'm advising and say, look, if you're, this is somebody that you could potentially target. So that's one thing. And then I have to real quick, before I pass presenter to Tracy, jump into Jerry's brain really quickly, and I apologize. Let me close some of these windows. I had his brain open, but I think I lost it with all these browsers. So I'm going to just open it from my desktop real quick. And while I'm doing that, Tracy, I don't know if there are any questions on what I've shown so far.
Yes, I know there are a lot of questions. Matt's been answering quite a few of them. But, all right. Let's take a peek here.
We can save those for Q&A, because it does look like Jerry's brain open. And I did want to show Jerry's brain as a corollary to what I showed as far as using the brain to map out people for investment, because this particular brain has a nice section on people as well. His brain has over 260,000 thoughts on everything, but if I go into his funding section, I can actually go ahead and look at a number of cool people in his brain. So one of the areas that I thought was quite interesting, since we're talking about people, is you can see funding sources. He's got all kinds of people organized by investor, benefactors, invention capital, and there's a section here that he has on philanthropists, which is pretty interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Alice Marriott, and I've got her Wikipedia page appearing below. And again, this is a public brain. In fact, I'll just go ahead and share. If you guys want to go to this brain right now, it's at https://webbrain.com/u/17qk. But of course, we'll go ahead and send you the link. But this shows that Alice Marriott is a philanthropist. She has started her child is J.W. Bill Marriott Jr., and she's also founded the Marriott School of Management. So that's sort of her thing. It's a wonderful school on management, so we can see that. And then just another example of how things are connected. Of course, she is married to J. Willard Marriott, so we've got that connection there. And you can see how interesting that comes together, and that's part of the whole Marriott International conglomerate. And again, this is Jerry's brain. Jerry is a very interesting and creative thinker who does a lot about the sharing economy. So he's just kind of done a complete brain dig, but you can see that he actually has J. Willard Marriott categorized under famous Mormons, and we've got all kinds of other people that fit under that category, like Stephen Covey, which is very interesting because I had no idea that Stephen Covey was a Mormon, but I think of him more as a management author. And from there, I can look at, other famous management authors. So here, you can really see the power of the brain's many-to-many connections and how much fun it is to kind of wander through a larger people network here. So now I'm going to look at, I can go into David Norton, for instance, a management author, and he's written the Balanced Scorecard and links to that, and of course all kinds of other things. And then if I want to go into to search for anyone, I'm just going to do a search for Bill Gates in Jerry's brain. And actually I'm going to go to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that was started, because they're also philanthropists. But this is another way of, again, kind of seeing the connections between people. So he actually has Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation organized under Bill and Melinda Gates, as well as social entrepreneurs. So this is another category that he felt was relevant, and you can look at all these different social entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs who are making money but doing it in a way that they're creating a new value to society and expanding the ecology of what we do. So now if I click on Bill Gates, of course, that takes me into a whole other universe. So here we can see all the stuff Bill does. We've even got a link to Bill on Twitter, relevant news articles, and he is organized under several different categories. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom. I'm going to zoom to 75% so you guys can see a little bit better the full breadth of this connection of this individual. But this is just to show you that, when you're doing research on people, the brain can scale, the brain can handle, and, investments. This is also relevant. We have a number of police and law enforcement agencies that use the brain to investigate suspects, a lot of Department of Defense applications where they're connecting key people of interest to different regions. So lots of possibilities for this, and you can see how nicely it maps out. So here, Bill Gates, other than famous founders, this takes us to Microsoft, and now we're in kind of the whole universe of Microsoft, which can be, which we can go into software vendors, and now we're in a whole other area. Now, we've always got our past thought list, so if I ever want to go back to maybe that thought on social entrepreneurs, because that was kind of interesting, I can click on that. Or if I just want to go back to the Bill Gates and the foundation, I can do that. Or I can also use my browser just to kind of move backwards in the brain. And now I can backtrack. And I hope this is coming across in the web meeting. It's just really fast and responsive and dynamic, but it's going to be a little bit slower. But I just want to kind of give you a sense of these dynamic connections and the rich context that you can create with people. And I think that's a good segue, Tracy, into kind of what you're doing with some of your people mappings. And Tracy's going to show you a few more examples of how to prospect with people, as well as integrating Salesforce and Outlook data. So we cover all the different sources of information for people and how to get those into your brain.
Terrific. Well, let's jump in. And so we're going to keep this going. I also have some more ideas for you, some different, another perspective of how you might incorporate people along with everything else that you're working on. So this is a fictitious company, global software. I've got things organized by key departments. Maybe I want to view, again, kind of looking at things from the perspective of, well, what department is it? What do they have going on? And then who are the people that manage and oversee and have responsibility over different departments and areas? So this is one way I've organized some information in this brain, is to set it up by department. But another thing that I've done that I want to take you down through a bit further is just to go into this area I created for people. A lot of different types of people. On a daily basis, I might have set up for my business. I've got business partners, and business partners might be broken down into, affiliates, resellers, integrators. I, of course, also have customers. I might want to group some customers in and group them together by industry, maybe geographical location of the customers. And in addition to customers, I've got vendors, maybe people that I call topic experts, and maybe these are, inventors, researchers, authors, people maybe that I, kind of look up to as being experts in their fields. And then I also have an area for employees. And this is nice, my area for employees. I've actually, one thing that's great that can help with the brain is, maybe you've got people scattered around in different locations, different offices. Well, who's out there in the Chicago office that has, maybe some expertise that you could leverage if you knew about that? So recently, we're going to go ahead and say that I took a trip to our Chicago office today. And I'm getting done with my trip, and I met with 5 different people in this location. So the very first thing I would do is go ahead and set up some thoughts, which I've done just to speed things along. I've created my thoughts for my 5 people that I've met with. I've also added some icons, as Shelley was showing earlier on. These could be images, I'm grabbing off, maybe it's our HR, our portal, something like that, where we've got some employee images. But I've got the folks here in Chicago. Well, now let's rework this a little bit better. How else could I kind of fine-tune this? Well, the first thing I might want to do with these folks is set up some thought types. I'm going to start with Courtney. I'm just going to right-click on Courtney, and I'm going to also go to my thought types, and I have VP of Training already set up. So what we're going to say is that, a lot of our trainers, this is a location where a lot of our trainers come from. We've got trainers, we've got some sales, and we've got some operations. So Courtney's the VP. I'm going to go ahead and say that Chip, I'm going to add one for him as well. We will say that he is the VP of Sales. So I've got Chip added as the VP of Sales, Courtney as the trainer, VP of Training, and then we'll set up one more for Ronald real quick. Since there's different types of VPs, we'll say that Ronald is the VP of Operations. So now we've got that thought type over Ronald. And now what I want to do is there's also a couple trainers. And the last 2 people that I've not yet thought typed, I've got Ted and Tiffany here. Well, they're trainers, and they actually technically report to Courtney. So I'm going to go ahead and just simply grab these 2 thoughts and drag them to be underneath Courtney. Now I can see that they report underneath Courtney, and I'm going to create just a new thought type again for trainer. And now I've got Ted as a trainer. Tiffany can also be a trainer. So now I've added some thought types to incorporate some of the things that I've learned during this trip and what the folks' different roles are. Some other things I might do while I'm there. I'm meeting with Courtney. Now I want to make sure, don't forget about notes. There's a lot you can do to keep track, to refresh your memory, remind yourself of key meetings that you're having. You can insert timestamps. I insert timestamps all the time in all of my notes. I always have a timestamp inserted. And then I'm just going to jot down some details about my meeting with Courtney today. And to talk about all the different great things we can do to expand our training facility. So I capture all my details here. So I've got this meeting that's happened. Now another thing that happens is actually Courtney tells me about someone she knows. And this is actually someone that works for an organization that I have some other connections to. I don't know the person she's just told me about, but there is a connection there. So from Courtney, I'm going to go ahead and create a jump thought now. And I'm going to go ahead and add this new person. I haven't yet met them, but they're interesting. They're a good connection, a good contact for me. I'm going to go ahead and just simply call them a manager. So now I've linked in Catherine. This is someone that Courtney's told me about. What's the connection? I might remember right now the reason why they're linked together. But what was it? Let me go ahead and set up a link type between Courtney and Catherine. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. Maybe they're tennis partners. So they're seeing each other once a week, good friends. I want to remember that. They're tennis partners, that's the personal connection there. So let's go ahead now over to Catherine, and she's got her thought type. I've got my link type to tell me that, to remind myself of how I know about Catherine and what her connection is to Courtney. Now what I'm going to do really quick is just open up Salesforce. Now, as you know, Salesforce is web-based, so I've just gone ahead and opened up my contacts for Catherine. So in the meantime, I went ahead and added her into Salesforce, but I really want to capture this into my brain. So with Salesforce, you can grab a hold of this URL. Just grab the little icon directly to the left and drag it right over into your brain. And I'm going to drop it right on top of Catherine. Now I've got a connection to that Salesforce page. So whenever I'm ready, if I happen to, I need to pull out those contact details for Catherine, I can just simply now click on my Salesforce attachment, and if I'm logged into Salesforce, boom, it's going to open up and take me right to Catherine's contact details. Once again, I might want to go down to my notes and leave a note for myself. Another reminder. I want to say that I went ahead and called Catherine and introduced myself. So I'll jot down a few notes, the date and the time, what I did. So I called Catherine up, introduced myself. And now Catherine, she is part of, well, one, I also have this thought called my network. This is just kind of an area where when I first meet someone, whether it's at a network event, it's someone I ran into and met on an airplane, whatever it is, an interesting person I don't want to lose track of. I want to kind of keep these. I don't know when and where I might need to phone them, but I could see somehow in the future, maybe wanting to kind of tap into that connection there. So I'll go ahead and just link her up to a thought called my network. So then she's there. But she's also directly works for a company that I'm also doing business with called Verizon Services. I'm going to go ahead and go over to my search and just instantly activate my other account for Verizon Services. So let me see what I have in here. I've got some existing contacts with Verizon Services. As you can see, I've got some proposals and meetings and all sorts of things that are already happening. But I don't yet have Catherine linked here. So let's drag her in. So she's now linked as, someone that's linked under my Verizon contacts. But I have someone else here named Bob. And Bob is someone that I could drag and drop from Outlook. So let me go ahead. I actually closed my Outlook. So let me just open this up real quick here.
And while you're opening it, I want to say I do actually like the idea because I was using notes for just additional information on people, but I do see you've got your notes for just phone numbers and contacts, and I'm so glad I saw that under Bob because I do that all the time in my brain. Like even my contractor, I have his name, and right under there is his phone number, and you activate that person. So obviously in this example, if you wanted to call Bob, it's like so easy. His stuff is right in your notes.
Is right there. That's right. So now, hopefully, I know Outlook loads a little slow, but I've got Outlook open. I've got just a few contacts here, and here's Bob. So in this case, let's say I'm using Outlook. It's not Salesforce, but I do use Outlook. I've already added Bob into Outlook, but again, there's the advantage of just dragging him over his contact info into TheBrain as well. So I've got a direct connection to that. And again, maybe I've got some key emails. Bob's emailed me some really important, long, detailed emails on agendas that he wants to talk about in our upcoming meeting. You know, all of that you can be dragging from. So I've just dragged a contact, you know, his contact information. What's nice about Outlook is you'll see it'll populate the notes. So when you drag that contact in from Outlook, it populates the notes. So I can capture that right there. I can also, of course, as child thoughts, see folks that maybe Bob manages. And let's also create another link type and make it a directional link type. So from Bob and Andrea, there's a connection here. Why are they linked together? I'm going to go to link type, and maybe I'll go ahead and say reports to. But what I want to also do is you'll see there's a little link tool that I can also click on to set an arrow. Now I can see very clearly that Andrea, with my arrow pointing up to Bob, I can get a sense that Andrea reports to Bob. So you can really add, you know, those details and then that direction if that's important, if it's, you know, kind of a different direction depending on kind of what way you're looking at it. But Andrea reports up to Bob. And we've got his contact details in. Again, you'll see how fast these things can continue to grow and expand. Bob might also introduce me to someone named Valerie, which I can go ahead and link in. I've made a connection there. As you can see, Valerie's someone that's also, these things, you know, when they're all based in certain, you know, geographical regions, you know, you meet one person that expands on, they introduce you to others. Now I've got everyone here that Bob's introduced me to Valerie. Again, if I need to put a connection, how does Bob know Valerie? And how did I get that connection? You know, how did I get that referral? Let's add another link type and say that, since I already have a few link types, maybe they're siblings. So now I've got Valerie, who's working for the Ford training department. Her sibling is Bob Thomas, works for Verizon Services. And again, I can use those link types all, you know, throughout the way to give me that guidance in seeing who knows who. So this is how I can kind of put things together, all my business contacts. Now, just to take a couple minutes, I know we're on the hour, but let me just open up. There's a couple fun examples we had planned, too. So let me get one opened called My Movie Brain. And this has a lot of fun actors. And this, again, just a complete hobby brain. I've got a big movie collection of a lot of really old movies made in the early 1930s and 40s and so forth. And I created just a library in my brain of all of the movies that I owned. But then I had a lot of fun in taking the actors, and I was always doing a lot of research about their lives, and I was really fascinated with it. So it was just really fun to also put it into the brain. And I love to go back to this brain, you know, every now and again when, you know, I'm looking back trying to remember some certain things about maybe some old actors, and I can always go to my brain, and once again you'll see where I use a lot of the notes to capture biographies, details about people. I like this brain a bit because I do have a lot of nice kind of link types set up as well with some different colors. You can see I've added a lot of images to take a person, the movies that they may have, you know, played a role in. I've got connections even to, you know, kind of someone you could call a nemesis or a rival. This was, you know, another actress who was quite the rival for her during that day. And so I've made that connection there, color-coded that link to show rivals. I've also have spouses linked in. So this is just a fun brain, and I've got this one online that people can browse through as well. And, it's just fun to be able to see where you can go with it. I linked in a lot of different people. I'll just click around a little bit and go over to another actress and became, Princess of Monaco, of course, and that's Grace Kelly. And I've got her linked under kind of one of her, leading directors that kind of took her under his wing. And, of course, again, more link types to co-stars. Also, why is she linked into, a thought called Monaco? I can see as, my link type, she became the Princess of Monaco. And then again, since this is kind of movie themed, I have Monaco linked up into my, cool movie locations, which I'd probably also want to go ahead and just link back up to my Tracy's Movie Brain. So I've got kind of a whole other way to browse through and not only see connections in people, places, events, movies, projects, you name it. There's obviously people involved in all of it. And so it's fun to, create a brain for that. Also, let me just quickly, and I know I want to be conscious of the time here, but I'm just going to do open up just a real quick example as well. Again, these are public brains we can share with people, so anything that's kind of exciting to you. Here's another brain that one of our colleagues put together where I've got the House of Tudor, if I wanted to go back through kind of history and learn some different things, Elizabeth of York, and I can learn about, children of Elizabeth of York and times when... times as the Queen and dates and, a lot of, again, you'll see details filled out in the notes. Or if I want to do a quick little research into something, a little more up to date, I can, look at current. Here's Elizabeth II. Again, you can see as child thoughts, children of Elizabeth. We've got, of course, Prince Philip linked in. So again, a lot of fun ways to, also what I like about this brain is you can see kind of the, a cool background as well, and a lot of tags, a lot of usage of tags to, for some more metadata about these individuals that you can always kind of filter by. And again, also a lot of, so a lot of customizations in this brain as well, and a lot of, obviously you can see a lot of great pictures and icons as well. So that's kind of 3 real fast overviews and ideas for you on how else you can incorporate people. So Shelley, since we're just over the hour, I want to just check in with you and see where we're at in terms of Q&A, and if there's anything additional that I should dive into.
All right. Yes. Excellent. And very good examples. A lot of people are commenting and would like copy. So what I'll do is in our thank you notes, I will include links to both these brains you can reference. And actually, Tracy, if we can just go back to your movie brain, there's a question earlier in the Q&A, and by the way, the Tudor brain was relevant for genealogy. Somebody did ask how you could use it for genealogy, so you can see that, about a relationship choice and how to decide whether something is a parent, child, or jump. And I love this Grace Kelly example, because here you've got Alfred Hitchcock as a parent, and then Cary Grant and James Stewart as a jump. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the choices you made and kind of deciding whether something is a parent, child, or a jump, because that's kind of where I think a lot of people love the idea of getting people into the brain, but making those decisions, parent, child, jump. So this has been a little bit this is a nice example where you can see some people in both types of areas,
in both types of
relationship zones.
Absolutely. And that's really subjective. You can do this a lot of different ways, and that's what I think I like most about the brain is that flexibility. But basically how I looked at things, I started off, I kind of took it from, my first angle was, well, let me add in here kind of a lot of my just favorite actors. Let me start there. Let me start with just the ones, I've always really enjoyed. I've got a lot of their old movies. So I started there, and I figured, well, who's an actor? Let me start with that category. And then what I found was there was just other ways to then make other connections. After I had made that initial, I kind of went through and I added my actors. Then when I started going into each individual actor, I started to think about that in more detail. And then I started to do some research and grab my notes on this particular actor. And that's where I started thinking about other parent thoughts. And I started thinking about, Betty Davis being one of my favorites. And it led me to, well, let's create this other area called strong female characters. And let me categorize her there as well. And then I linked it. So I kind of sometimes, I'm kind of creating child thoughts and drilling downward, but then other times I'm going back upward. And then the same thing with Grace Kelly. My first original kind of approach was to get her categorized as an actor, but then I found, really her career, her movie career was quite small, and Alfred Hitchcock was kind of the one director she worked for. It made movies
so
for
in that
Alfred
sense,
Hitchcock.
he became a parent because he sort of got that authority or kind of a senior authority. So that makes sense. And that, in a way, that's very similar to kind of what I did with my reporting structure. So you could see that parent relationship can be used for people in that sense as well. Very interesting.
Yep, absolutely. And so that's why I did that, was then, thinking of, since that is, Alfred Hitchcock would be kind of that authoritative figure, that, that parent thought. And then, for me, drilling down my child thoughts, I thought were going to all be movies. I thought I'm going to have the movies as child thoughts, and then all the research on the particular movies. And then, in terms of jump thoughts, that's when, again, what I recommend sometimes is just start to create your child thoughts. The reason why I say that is because you can always just drag a thought to be a child. If I had a thought, I'll go ahead and move James Stewart and let's just say I created him as a child of Grace Kelly. And I realized, well, no, that doesn't really fit the theme. As you can see, the rest of my child thoughts are all movies. So that doesn't really make sense to me. So let me just change that and drag James Stewart over to be a jump thought. So my jump thoughts are more the co-stars. And what I was doing, I wasn't looking to create a jump thought for every single co-star she ever had. I just kind of picked those key ones because, again, this was my own personal little library of movies. So I was sticking with the people I enjoy the most. And so it wasn't about trying to figure out how to archive every single, actor that's ever lived and existed and worked with Grace Kelly. It was about finding the ones that I really enjoyed and, kind of my top favorites, and I linked them as jump thoughts here. So the basic rule, after you've created your child thoughts, again, your jump thoughts are also related. They just don't fit the theme of those child thoughts. So hopefully that helps give you a little direction there.
All right, very helpful. And Marcia had a question. Very beautiful images. How did you attach the images to your thoughts? So it looks like you've got some images, and maybe you can zoom over How to Catch a Thief or Grace Kelly. Some in that. Yes. And that is also, that's especially fabulous for, movies and movie stars. Who wouldn't want to look at a picture of Grace Kelly? But let's review that, because that adding images to your brain can be so wonderful. Just give you that little extra Zen experience in visualizing your information.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, the main place I went to was imdb.com. That was my biggest research area for this brain, and a lot of great images. And then I just did the capture thought icon and grabbed. So I'll just grab any image. I can open up
and just
IMDb.
To review, there's two ways you can do it. You can copy and paste an image if it lets you copy and then paste that icon. Or if you just want a portion of the image, that's where you use that little snag it feature. So we'll have Tracy cover that as well, again, just to remind everyone how to do that.
Sure. So I'll go ahead. I've just created I'll just leave it under Grace Kelly because we're here. Let's just say there's this new movie I'm adding here. And if I want to just capture an image, if I go ahead and just right-click on this thought, I can choose to capture a thought icon. And let's just go ahead and say, this will bring up some crosshairs here. So obviously, of course, I would be on the image of this new movie trailer that I want to add, and just simply select it. And now I've captured that image off the web, and now it's attached and incorporated in.
All right, very good. And then real quick, just for those of you that do need to leave on the hour, we are going into overtime for Q&A. This is going to be a recorded session. It will be posted on our homepage. You can pause or rewind or go through anything we've covered today. and you will get an email to that recording. And we're going to stay for just a couple more minutes and cover a few more questions. And I also want to let you know, tomorrow we have the Brain 101 at Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And that, I did a little bit of that, starting a basic brain, but we focus mostly on people, networks, and people. If you want a broader view of all basic functionality and how to get started quickly, highly recommend that class. Tracy will be hosting tomorrow, and that'll be a more systematic review of all basic functionality to start a brain. So I'm just going to hop back to the Q&A and cover a few more questions for those of you that can stay on for a couple minutes. And there was a comment from David that I wanted to read, and he's saying the big deal for me and huge potential addition for the Brain platform would be making the link between two thoughts connectable as a distant thought. Much thinking and most planning occurs at specific intersections, i.e., I want to strengthen this connection. I plan to introduce these people. Another example is sailing interest, Joe's sailing profession. So yes, I mean, that is key in terms of those link types. And I think that's where we covered that a little bit in Tracy's earlier global software example, where the specificity of a link type and using those link annotations. And then the one thing that we haven't really talked about, because we're talking about linking, we've sort of done it, is linking to a distant thought. Tracy, can you just cover how you would actually link to a thought that's not immediately visible in the Plex, but you know you have it somewhere in your brain?
I know it's in there, and that's right. Yes, you can. I mean, that's definitely where you can either, and again, you can drag like you're going to create a new thought. And one thing you'll see is if you start to type, the brain is going to show you a list of all of your existing thoughts. So that is just a super quick, easy way. Let's just go ahead and say I need to add Grace Kelly also as a director. I could go ahead and now make that connection. So she's, of course, categorized now under director. You can do that. Another thing, always remember, if you have thoughts pinned, something I'll do is you can drag up to pin. Maybe if I wanted to connect Grace Kelly to my thought that's pinned called Best of the Best. And that's just my little area for just anything and everything that I think that I really love. You can drag that way. Just drag and connect to your pins. Remember, you have your past thought list, and Shelley referenced this earlier. You can drag, you could scroll back through your past thought list. You find a thought you want to link it to, you can drag down and make the link that way. So you'll see there's a lot of different ways, but also just always remember, just drag like you're going to create a thought. And if you know the name, just start to type the name of that thought, and you can always link to your existings.
All right, great. And then an earlier question from Dave, how do I know what sources can be integrated in the brain? And I'm glad you asked that question, and I guess what we can show is just a simple drag and drop of a URL. And while you get that URL ready, I'll kind of go into more in depth on this, Tracy. The cool thing about the brain is 99% of your information sources can be dragged and dropped. Mm-hmm. And stuff like Salesforce, LinkedIn, Facebook, SharePoint, what they all have in common is they have URLs. They have that relative path. So anything in a browser that has that browser URL can simply be dragged and dropped in. So let me show you how to do that. And that's really, with that, you can link to all kinds of things and create a powerful visualization of these very separate data sources all coming together visually.
So I went ahead and dragged in, I don't know if you saw that, the IMDb website.
Excellent.
So real easy, just just grab the little icon directly to the left of the URL, and then you can just drag that web page right into the brain.
All right, great. And then finally, again, we'll send those links out to publishing, but real quick, we're kind of on the end of the hour. A couple people asked how they do publish a brain on the internet, and that is through our cloud services, where you can actually just synchronize your brain to the cloud. And maybe we don't have, this is a whole other topic, but we will, maybe Tracy, if you want to just spend a couple minutes on brain publishing, and we'll close the webinar on that question.
Sure. So if you've put your brain, if you have a brain account, you set up a username and password, you've got that, then that means you can share your brain. You can share it publicly, which just means you want to be able to send just whoever you want a URL to your brain, and they can view it. They cannot edit, of course, but it gives you the ability to just share it with whoever you want, make it public. Or you could require someone to have a username and password in order to view your brain. You still want to share it, but you just don't want to make it quite as public. Now, from the Brain application, I went to the online menu and chose Brain Settings. This just logged me into my Brain cloud account. So I'm here, and I'm actually on the settings and the access control for my movie Brain. Now, you actually can see, it looks like I've got Matt. Matt has access to this Brain. He's got editor access because we are set up on a team environment. But so here's how, one, I could simply add someone. So if Shelly's in here, I could go ahead and look for Shelly. It'll scroll through some accounts here. Let's see if you're on my team. And I can give someone access this way by simply searching for their name, finding them, and again, as long as they have a Brain account, you can add them, and then you just simply scroll to the bottom and hit save. Then that person will have access to this Brain. Although, if you want to make it where it's just more public than that, you don't want to have someone you don't want them to have a username and password to be able to view your Brain. What we can also do is, from my main account page, you will see a list of every Brain that you've synchronized or created in the cloud. I can open up any of these Brains in my browser. I'll go ahead and open Global Software that we were just taking a look at. And if I right-click just anywhere in the blue background area, you'll see you have the option to select Share. Go ahead and select Share, and then you have the option to share this thought or this Brain. Now I want to go ahead and share this whole Brain. This now generates a URL, and you'll see this URL, which I can then, again, give to whoever I want to, and all they have to do is, if I've set it to public, they can just click on that link and have full reader access to this Brain. And then the final thing I'll just reference is, notice below there's also code for embedding into a website. So a whole nother option is you could take your Brain and actually embed it onto your own website so it can be viewed from there as well. So that, and we do have some tutorials on sharing. That's something also I could expand upon tomorrow during the 101 class if there ends up questions. But that's kind of the quick overview on sharing a Brain.
All right, great. And if you are interested, as Tracy mentioned, join us for the 101 class tomorrow. And then on June 18th, Tracy and I are hosting the Zen of remote collaboration and productivity. So we will cover a lot about synchronizing your data across multiple machines and adding users, and kind of the quick 5-minute demo will be augmented into a full-blown presentation on how to get into the nitty-gritty of all that. So definitely want to sign up for that on June 18th if you're interested. If you are a remote worker working with remote, so just need to synchronize your data all over the place, join us for that. And I think with that, we're going to close today's session. Before I do, Tracy, any other final thoughts or words of wisdom for our users still on the hanging in 30 minutes and overtime, learning about people networks?
More about people networks. That's right. I know we've covered a lot. Join me tomorrow. Just get started. Don't worry. I recommend just start getting some people added in there. You can always, even if you're undecided of, well, where do they go? How should I organize them? Where do I categorize them? Just get them in there, and these things can be reworked over time, and you can always remember, you can link them onto new parents and other parents. You can change things around, but don't be afraid to add them. I like to just jump in and, just get the people created right then, and then, like I said, these things can evolve over time, even if you're not sure where to, where to connect them, but you don't want to lose their info. So just, kind of get them connected in there, and you can always evolve it over time as well.
All right, great. And with that, we're going to close today's session. And just remember, connecting people, processes, and information. With that, you're going to have a very comprehensive brain. So we wish you all well in creating a people-centric view in your brain, and hope to see you again on future brain technology events. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.